Good morning, good morning, good morning, Perugia. We're delighted to, thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for starting your day with this uplifting topic. As Chrissy dubbed us yesterday, this is the panel on things that you love but will kill you. So corporate, if you're in the health world, corporate determinants of health might be a phrase that you're familiar with. This is, we try to avoid that phrase, I think, as journalists, but at my newsroom, The Examination, we sort of describe the beat, this is our beat essentially, as reporting on companies and the products that they make, the processes by which they make them, and the harms that those do. So I'm really delighted to be here with this esteemed group of investigative journalists to my left. These are all journalists whose work inspired us and me as we launched The Examination in September 2023, so we're about a year and a half old. And so we'll do some quick introductions. Again, my name is Ben Hallman. I'm the executive director at The Examination. And to my left.
Good morning. So I'm Stéphane Aurel. I'm an investigative journalist at Le Monde. And I specialize in corporate harm, most specifically corporations that sell pesticides, chemicals, food, tobacco, those companies. And like Ben mentioned, it's kind of it's encapsulated in the social science term, the commercial determinants of health. So I'll just let you sink in the expression. It means that the economic and political activities of companies have an impact on our health. And that's my beat. One aspect of what I'm working on too is it's also a social science term. It's called agnotology. Agnotology is about studying the social construction of ignorance. And corporations build ignorance by capturing the scientific building process and injecting lobbying arguments in the science processes. So that's one of my specialties too, is the manipulation of science to defend commercial interests. And I'm trying to putting all this know-how. I've been working on those topics for 15 years and empowering colleagues in cross-border projects at Le Monde.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Giles from the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. It's just a really hard name to say, and if you ring people up and you want to find out something from them, even if it's just what time is your press conference, they don't want to talk to you. So we're based in the UK and we cover UK and international issues around public interest journalism. So that's everything from global health, financial corruption, environment, big tech, and also UK issues including access to justice. Quick plug, we love working with journalists and publications around the world doing cross-border collaboration, so please come and talk to me afterwards if you think you're interested in that. In terms of health, we kind of look at it in two ways. We look at how do you get access to things that will help you be healthier, so education, vaccination, reproductive health, all those good things. And then we also look at how should you be being protected from the things that harm you. And that's obviously the angle we're taking this morning. So it's not just the things you like that will kill you. I don't really like some of the things we're going to be talking about here. But we're super happy to be here with these amazing journalists and really happy to hear from everyone in the audience as well.
Hello, I'm Fabiola Torres, a journalist from Peru and the founder of Salud con Lupa, the only media outlet in South America that focuses on investigative journalism in public health. We started 5 months before the COVID pandemic. It was a difficult time, but also the right time. We focus and publish stories with a national focus, but also a regional view to connect public health problems across the borders. In Salud con Lupa, we think that public health is not just a section or a topic, it's a way to understand the world. Public health is in the food you eat, in the air you breathe, in the medicine you take, and in the systems that are supposed to protect us.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if this works. So we're investigative journalists, so we have 1,300 slides. No one's leaving until we're done. Let's see if this works. Okay. So I just want to set the table, or set the stage a little bit for, why it is that we do what we do on this stage. The statistics are pretty stunning. So, more than a third of deaths each year can be directly traced to a handful of industries: the tobacco industry, the alcohol industry, oil and gas industry, fossil fuels, and increasingly the ultra-processed food industry. So it's just sort of a vast amount of harm that is relatively undercovered for all of that. This is just another way to sort of break it down. These are estimates, so it's between 20 to 30 million people each year, and I think if you, it doesn't, I think, take much more context than that to sort of understand why it's important to do sort of the deep accountability reporting that the journalists here on the stage do. So, kind of given the scale of harm, why is it that there's relatively little coverage of the companies that are often responsible for it? This is not, this is not a deeply researched list. I don't have empirical evidence to prove that these points are correct, but they feel right. I think one piece of it is that, health journalists often, well, first of all, there's just not enough health journalists in the world, probably, just full stop. Those of us that are here, often don't have the training or the resources, or maybe the institutional support to kind of take on big business, right? Which can be, businesses are, opaque and can be litigious. They operate across borders. We'll hear a little bit today, I think, about kind of how we work, which is trying to stitch together these sort of often cross-border collaborations so that we can kind of follow the harm to where it is and follow businesses as their practices across different countries. I believe there's, I think we intuit this as well, that there is a bias to news that happens, or death that happens quickly and spectacularly over death that happens sort of slowly over years and in a back bedroom. And then just another, I think just a fact is that the most harmed populations, the marginalized communities who are most often affected by sort of all harm, but especially corporate-driven harm, are historically undercovered by the news media as well. And Stefan, I think you have a few points you want to add to this as well.
Yes, I think one of the reasons why those topics have been underreported for a long time is because of a gender issue, in the sense that, we are 3 women here, Ben is here, but it's, for a long time it was like a consumer section issue, like which detergent should you use instead of why the hell do this product contain dangerous chemicals. And so there's this underreporting. It's changing now. I think the climate issue has made the environmental issue a priority, and that it brings together all the other health issues, like pollution, of course, is linked to fossil fuels. The air pollution kills 9 million people a year. And one of the other reasons is, Ben mentioned, the fact that it's an invisible problem. So one of our key missions is to make visible the invisible. And to give you let's play a not funny game, okay? I would like to ask you in the room, those of you who have experienced cancer personally or with loved ones, could you please raise your hands? Okay, so that's almost everybody. And you should know that the cancers have a genetic origin only for 10%. 90% is the environment. So this is what we're talking about.
Thank you, Stefan. And I'll say, one more observation before we move on is that it does feel as though some of these topics maybe, are getting increased coverage. My view is that it's often in the framing, at least in the United States, of wellness, right? So the wellness sections, and listen, I'm here for that coverage too. How many glasses of wine is too many at night? That's coverage that I can use. I think the type of journalism that my peers here to my left do really seeks to get to the who and what is responsible, and that's a tougher assignment. And speaking of a tougher assignment, Fabiola, if you would like to kick things off here, we've basically broken this up into 3 sections, and we're going to start with how the industry shapes public health narratives. Fabiola, I believe you can start here by talking a little bit about how the tobacco industry, through your reporting, you found that the tobacco industry is helping shape what we think about vaping and smoking.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to share some findings about or based on our collaborative investigations, nicotine networks, new products, old tactics. This is an investigation that reveals how much or millions of dollars the tobacco industry invested in shape the narrative across borders to promote the vapes. Can you change this? Yes, yeah. I have some findings. How this industry shapes the narrative. It's the usual suspect. They present now itself as the solution, not the problem. They talk about harm reduction. They say they want to help people to quit smoking, even though they still sell products with addictive nicotine. They use front groups. Philip Morris gave $400 million to the Foundation for the Smoke-Free World, which then gave the money for pro-vape organizations. And they also give money through intermediaries, NGOs like, it's the second place, they use NGOs and companies like Life Action, Knowledge, that also support activists and other organizations that don't say they have a connection with the industry. They present like experts, prepare papers, or are speakers, but they don't reveal the connection. Also, the industry get involved in public and political debates to influence them. And in my country was special, and in many Latin American countries, they found so-called consumer representative, like ASOVAPE. And they went to the Congress and to the media to speak for vapes because they support and they defend the harm reduction, political, but they didn't say they were supported by the industry. And well, this is just how they operate. But this industry, it's an old suspect. We investigate, and they have old tactics that redefine something but are the same.
Thank you. And Chrissy, at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, you've done some great reporting on Philip Morris International, and I think maybe you can add one more point to how the tobacco industry is shaping the narrative around sort of actually influencing research and science.
Yeah, it's one point. It might be quite a long point. So Fabiola, I was nodding because it's the same. So we did some work in Peru looking at how cigarettes were being sold to children by putting them next to sweets and selling them singly and things like that. And we're like, well, it's cigarettes, maybe no. We did an investigation into IQOS, which again is a Philip Morris product. Other big tobacco companies are available. So IQOS is heated tobacco. So it took me a long time to be like, it's not a vape. So a vape is nicotine and flavors. Heated tobacco is just a cigarette, but you don't burn it, you heat it. And that's the important difference, apparently. Essentially, we work with the University of Bath in the UK, who have an insanely good investigative group of academics, and we're going to talk a bit more about working with academics later. But we had a whistleblower. So this is only, I think, the third or fourth ever whistleblower from Big Tobacco. It's a Japanese doctor who worked for Philip Morris Japan, and he thought he was doing the right thing by joining Big Tobacco as a person who'd worked in public health and thought he could change things from the inside. I'm skeptical, but, you know, respect for trying. I think quite soon he realized that isn't how it was going to go. And you can read the investigation, it's really great. But in summary, I just had a mind-blowing stat that 80 cigarettes per person in the world were sold just by Philip Morris in 2023. So they say they're trying to exit cigarettes, yet they're selling enough for every person to have 80 each. That's one of the big tobacco companies, not all of them. In Japan, there's a really cozy relationship between Big Tobacco and government. So JTI, which is Japan Tobacco International, is a third owned by the Japanese government, and it's a great environment to launch your new nicotine or tobacco product. So our investigation used this whistleblower's accounts and leaked information to basically show that Philip Morris, as part of Philip Morris Japan, had given six-figure payments to two big universities in Japan. So as we'll talk about later, the way science and knowledge works in the world is you generate scientific knowledge, you publish it in a journal, it becomes part of the canon until it becomes falsified or debunked by somebody else, and then the knowledge continues to grow. And that's really good as long as no one's committing fraud. I'm not saying this company committed fraud, just for the record, but what I will say is that our whistleblower basically showed that Philip Morris was doing various things with these two major universities, including paying them six-figure sums to try and have a visiting researcher. Maybe that researcher would have helped find out that that heated tobacco is safer and could be used safely indoors in Japan. Who can say? But basically, the investigation's really great and very depressing in that the old tactics are being used for all the new products and still for the old products as well. And basically, I think you want to be able to trust knowledge, like you want to trust journalism, you want to trust scientific knowledge, but you have to ask who is paying, where's the knowledge come from, and is it reliable? And I think Steph is also going to talk more about that in a minute. So yeah, check out Fabiola's work and our work and the examinations work, and everybody else is on Big Tobacco. Unfortunately, it's not going away, despite what they tell us, and I don't think these products are really getting any healthier either.
So we're going to switch, same theme, different industry, actually even some of the same players historically. Fabiola, do you want to pick it back up and talk about some of the themes you found through your reporting about the food industry, the ultra-processed food industry, how they are capturing regulators and helping also set the agenda?
Yeah, they have similar patterns, but you know, revolving doors is very typical. Government officials move toward to the industry and vice versa. And in Peru, there is a popular couple in one sector. It is the agency that manages food safety. Monica Saavedra is a nutritionist that leads this agency, and after leaving the agency, she founded an association with the funds from the processed industry, food industry, to oppose to the new labels food under the healthy food law. She was like, she know a lot about how to fight. And then she became a deputy minister that lead the program Food for Social Programs in the country. And then now she's the executive president of the National Fisheries Health Agency in my country. And her husband runs a consultancy that helps companies with food safety and nutrition policies. Imagine, this is a typical case of revolving doors. And they continue because they are in the power right now. The other is lobbying without transparency and control. In some countries, like in Latin American countries, the lobbying is not registered. We don't have like some mechanism to control this. And everything is under the table. And this is not just lobby, it's also corruption. This is one of the reasons that in Argentina, Peru, Mexico, Colombia, the approval of healthy food laws was delayed in the Congress because big processed food companies lobby to stop the laws, to stop them. The other thing is the buying scientific credibility. Professional association endorse unhealthy products in exchange for funding. And in Peru, we investigate that nutrition and cardiology associations approve sugary and salty products from Alicor, Nestlé, Bimbo. They sell like seals, many seals. And if you see a product that needs so many seals to look healthy, it probably isn't. Well, the next, please. The industry goals. They want to block public health regulation in order to their interests. They usually trick people using ads or marketing that look like science. It's very common because they try to deny risk or minimize the risk. They have their own science, made their own science to support this kind of marketing. Yeah.
It's an example of science-like marketing.
I mentioned the nutritionist and cardiology associations and the seals for the Nestlé and Bimbo products. For example, there is like it's very common in Milo. You know this product that is like chocolate, but it's not cacao. There is no chocolate there. There is just sugar there. But there was a popular football player in my country, Paolo Guerrero. He was the image of this product and also promotes the sales in the ads.
Ben, can I just say as well, during COVID, we looked at baby milk formula, and we found that the companies were using the idea of protecting your baby, and they were kind of giving it this like shadow of like immune protection during a like global pandemic. And obviously there was no evidence, it's the opposite, right? Like milk formula is less good than breast milk at protecting your child. That's well known. And it was like it felt like such a depressing, like bold attempt at kind of appealing to parents' guilt and fears around an unknown disease wiping out populations. So yeah, the science, the kind of faux science is real and deeply depressing.
I'll just add one example myself from our newsroom at the examination. We investigated how the food industry and big beverage industry are basically paying off registered dietitians to advertise unhealthy products, sugary products as healthy on Instagram and TikTok. And so this is sort of idea of buying credibility is definitely a theme. If you're doing reporting on this beat, I think maybe we'd recommend this is definitely a rich vein to explore. And of course, a dietitian would be a health professional that one might trust to give proper eating advice. And they're also just not content with the traditional forms of advertising anymore, television or print or whatever. Social media is definitely the new frontier in figuring out ways to get influencers who have huge followings to promote their stuff. Is what we've seen in the examination as the kind of the latest way that the food industry is trying to influence the eating habits of young people. And of course, once that's key, right? Once you're, so many of our habits are ingrained from the time that we're children, and so you can get people hooked early, then you have lifelong problems. I want to switch gears a little bit to what happens with the science. So, you know, I don't think at this point in history we need to spend a lot of time in our journalism trying to convince people that smoking is dangerous, right? I think that's probably established fact. Sometimes, but that's not the case with all of, on every beat that we cover. And so, Stefan, I'm hoping you can walk us through some examples from your reporting of, you know, how you take on a subject. I think you're going to talk a bit about PFAS, the forever chemicals. You know, how do you take on these topics when maybe the science is uncertain or even doesn't fully exist yet?
Yes, thank you. So it's I've been working for 3 years on this project called the Forever Pollution Project. It's about a family of chemicals you've never heard about before, like about 2 or 3 years ago. So the PFAS means per and polyfluoro. God, I can never pronounce it. And it's, I mean, you can pronounce it, I can pronounce it because I'm nervous. But these chemicals are in your blood. 100% people here in this room have PFAS in their blood. So, you know, we live in capitalism, but capitalism lives also within us. And they are part of our biological composition. They influence the diseases we will have and maybe our death. And so those chemicals are very convenient. This is why they've been used by industry in many, many applications. They were invented in the 40s, and they are the most well-known application is Teflon, so non-stick pans. But it's not only non-stick pans, it's also waterproof clothing, grease-proof. It's used, you know, in toilet paper, dental floss, but also sealants for facilities that manufacture acid or this kind of thing. So they are very useful because they are very resistant, etc. The problem is that now they are everywhere and they are not destroyed by like natural conditions, sun, wind, water. So they are here forever, hence their nickname of forever chemicals. So that's this project at the beginning was really about what I mentioned earlier, making visible the invisible. And so what we did is we looked for contamination data, asking regulatory agencies, scientific teams all over Europe if they had been sampling the environment to give us the results and also the geolocation. And so we put on this map that you can see that was quite a shock to the public and also to regulators who kind of realized the extent of the problem. So there was this different levels of information, non-contaminated sites, so with actual sampling, but also presumptive contaminated sites. And that means places that can be suspected to be contaminated because of the economic activity that is taking place or that has taken place here. Like typically, like airports and military bases, because they use firefighting foams that were filled with PFAS for a very long time and that have been major source of contamination of groundwater, for example. And so we also mapped 20 PFAS manufacturing facilities, and which is like somehow insane. Like before investigation, EU regulators didn't know where those 20 facilities were, and exactly we knew there were PFAS facilities in Europe, but we didn't know where they were because companies don't have to give this information to regulators or to the public. And so this map that we published was kind of a revelation to the public of the extent of this issue that is now called by experts the worst pollution crisis that humanity has ever faced. Could you please show the next slide? And so to do this, we kind of experimented. So there's a second project that we published in January called the Forever Lobbying Project, and it was about the lobbying of industry to prevent the European ban of those chemicals, which would be a historical move. And it's really experimental journalism. So it's cross-border, but it's also cross-field. And we worked with experts. We asked them, it's not that they were like embedded in the project, but we were in constant dialogue with experts just to not make blunders, to make the right choices in terms of science, like for example, which chemicals we should show in the info box on the map, this kind of very detailed things. And at the end of this adventure, we published a scientific paper to share the methodology we had used, because mapping those, like for the presumptive contaminated sites is what, as a regulator, you should do to prioritize decontamination, for example. And so, like the Japanese authorities, for example, asked us, can we see your methodology, because we might use it in Japan to map our presumptive contaminated sites. So that was one of the incentive for us to publish. And so that's both a pride, and it was very difficult. It's much more difficult than writing a story, I can tell you. And to write in a peer, so it's the #1 scientific journal on environmental pollution. So we had to go through the peer review process, and we published in April 2024. And then the second thing that came out of this expert review journalism experience is that we, at Le Monde, we don't have the resources to update and maintain the map with new results, because tons of data are coming every day. Because PFAS is in the news, there are regulations coming out on water especially, so lots of knowledge is coming. So we transferred our baby to the CNRS, which is the #1 public research institution, organization in France. It means National Research, Scientific Research Center. And the data journalist who worked with us on the project was hired by the CNRS to organize the transfer of the data. So now there's a website called the PFAS Data Hub, where there's 1 million lines, points on the map now. And it's not, we had 40,000, now it's 1 million.
Thank you, Stéphane. I mean, I just think that's so impressive. And, you know, I think about investigative journalism, and I tell the journalists in our newsroom that, you know, you want to really become an expert on, ultimately at some point you become an expert on what it is you're reporting on. And I think this is really the apotheosis of that, right? Be actually a peer-reviewed article that began with a journalistic question. And Chrissy, just going to pivot to you quickly, if you don't mind. Sometimes you don't have the data. What's your solution?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's such a cool project, Steph. It's amazing. So much. So yeah, basically, I think I study biochemistry, and I think the reason I really like investigations is because they're hypothesis-based, just like science, right? And our job as journalists is to uncover the truth, but if the truth in the sense of data isn't there, I think we realize we can generate it. So just like Steph's team and like Fabiola and like Ben's team. So I think there's like a few ways you can do this. If you get to know the scientists working in the area you're interested in, just like Steph, well, the first step is that you could bring together data that exists from disparate sources. So you could find it from different parts of the internet. You can find it from different groups around the world. You can kind of bring that together and assimilate it and process it in a way that then your readers can understand it in a way they haven't before. So that data's there, it's just no one's brought it together. Or you can basically work with scientists who generate data and then bring that data to life. You can like narrativize it, so find people affected by it, find the human stories, tell the kind of impact piece of it, because scientists are very good at the facts and figures. They don't really, their business isn't really on the whole about the human side, unless you're talking sociologists, obviously. The other thing you could do is collaborate with scientists to get your own data sets. So just like Steph did, we've done this a few times at TBIJ. So in COVID, we realized the two big gas companies in the world were potentially price spiking, basically hiking prices up. So we literally just called up different places in sub-Saharan Africa and said, how much for a D cylinder of oxygen? And we just put that information out there. And that led to this insane series of events that meant that actually there ended up being loads of more funding release for medical oxygen. It was like a very small question that we could answer. We've looked at the amount of nicotine in these heated tobacco sticks. It was like 8 times more than I think had been publicized by the company. Again, we worked with a doctor called Aurélie in Lausanne. She was great. And then the bottom picture there, we've just done a piece about substandard snake antivenoms. And there was lots of published data about some of these things, but actually we bought our own antivenoms in various countries in Africa, sent them to Valencia and got this lovely man called Juan to test them. So our researchers are now experts on gas chromatography and things that they'd never heard of until about 3 months ago. So as I've put at the bottom, I think there is a virtuous circle between research-minded journalists, which I would argue should be all journalists, and journalistically minded researchers. So don't be shy if you're an editor or a researcher to reach out to an academic and explain what you're after. And in fact, if we go on to the next slide, Ben, thanks. We did this for a story about climate change. So we have an excellent environment team at TBIJ, and we're thinking about how do we tell the story of climate change in a way that people care about. Because a bit like antimicrobial resistance, which is another thing that's probably going to kill us all, people, it's not that they don't care, but like, tell me something new, like we're all going to die, what can I do about it? So we're trying to humanize these problems and give people, I guess, a sense of agency. So when we did some work around climate change, there's a few ways of tackling it. So we started at the kind of source of the problem. So we've done some really good reporting in the Amazon, in Brazil and other countries looking at deforestation, for example. And I love our environment team. One of my former colleagues is here. They have ruined beef, cheese, leather, collagen. There's quite a few things we can't enjoy now because they come from deforested land. But we can find the supply chains that are ethical. So that's good news. So we worked with an indigenous group in Brazil. We gave them a drone so they could map their own experiences of kind of deforestation and land loss. We also linked the fact that the company that was grazing cattle on this illegally taken land was part of Nestlé's supply chain. So we can hold the big corporations to account by being like, this beef is coming from a bad place you shouldn't be growing cows in. But we can also say to consumers in the UK, if you want to be more ethically minded, you maybe don't want to buy this brand. Now, we would never as overtly say, don't buy this brand, because we're not campaigners and we're not activists. But we want to put information into the hands of people that can make a choice with it. Another thing, if you don't live in Brazil and you don't really care about beef, we wanted to try and help people understand what climate change and health meant for them. So this project here was a community-based project based in the UK. So we try and work with communities, not just work on them. So we went out to Southwark, which is a part of London, which is one of the hottest parts of the UK, which is a part of an oxymoron, right? We did this 2 summers ago, and obviously it's like one of the coldest summers on record, and we were like, sorry, UK, we've ruined our already terrible weather for you. But what was kind of mind-blowing is even though it was honestly quite a dismal summer, people's houses were getting up to 30 degrees C. People were living in, it was like privately owned, rented, like all sorts of houses. Some people lived in places where you have community heating and you can't turn it off. So this woman's trying to get her baby to sleep and it's 30 degrees in her house. Never before, which I couldn't believe, has somebody measured internal temperatures in houses and compared it to the meteorological temperature outside. I mean, how simple is that? We work with the University of Glasgow. I've got these cool sensors. You plug them in a bedroom and they just peep out the information, bleep, bleep, bleep. And then at the end of the trial period, you can go back to the people and be like, God, did you know it got this hot? One woman took the data to her council and was like, can you sort this out? And next slide, please, Ben. You can see here some of the impact. So, yeah, at the bottom, the council of the borough in London we looked at announced £1 million investment, and they quoted this study. And again, it was a really good piece of work, but also it wasn't rocket science. Get some sensors, plug them in, see how hot it got, get people's stories, put that out at council meetings, put it out on social media, make a video. Like, you don't have to be like reinventing the wheel. And I think the other things we're looking at are how is your health affected in terms of flooding? If you enjoy fruit, it's probably been picked by some workers somewhere in southern Europe, at least if you live in the UK. Those guys are working in horrendous conditions sometimes. And who is monitoring their internal body temperatures? Who's measuring their urine? Because kidneys are the first things to go in extreme heat situations. So again, we're looking at how do we talk to academics already working in this space to also get those human stories? So I guess what I would say, if there's one takeaway from our side, is like, if the data isn't there, you can find it. And don't be afraid to combine the quantitative, so the numbers, with the qualitative, so the people's stories or the experience. You go there yourself, you're like, bloody hell, it's hot. Like, so don't feel like you have to be a PhD to use science in your work, and there's no such thing as dumbing down. You're telling human stories about science and health, and that's what we're all here for. I'm going to shut up.
Thanks, Chrissy. That's inspirational. Fabiola, just briefly, do you talk a little bit about your reporting on heat waves and climate migration?
Yeah, in Salud con Lupa we have a section that is named Climatopedia, because we frame the heat in the context of climate change. People need to understand the causes and the urgent to act, but we don't just show the problem. We try to also propose solutions or preventive action, because there are no public policies in many Latin American countries, but I can talk about Peru. There are no. And we lived last summer hot waves, heat. It was very complicated because people dead and they didn't know why. And we have to recognize the unequal impacts of heat. Elder adults, children, outdoors workers, people with chronic illness, with mental health conditions, migrants, many of them are in more risk. Also, we pay attention that we have to balance between extreme events and everyday heat. Because we didn't focus only on official heat waves, long-term exposure to heat, even if it doesn't break records, can seriously harm health, especially in urban areas. Lima, for example, the capital, doesn't have enough green areas. And we have like islands of heat, and it's very complicated. And this is another unequal situation. And also in tropical areas. Yeah, we try to focus this in the agenda.
Thanks, Fabiola. So we have, for the working journalists in the room, we have some tips here. I have actually 2 slides. I'm going to sort of toggle back and forth through them. But rather than just sort of reading them to you, it seems we have about 8 minutes left. Maybe we can take a few questions from the crowd. Do I give my microphone? Here, I'll share. Oh, here's the microphone over here. I think right here.
Sorry. Thank you very much. That was an amazing talk. My name is Peter Young. I'm a freelance reporter, and I'm just getting into doing some longer-term investigations for the first time this year. And one of the stories I'm looking into is how the EU fishing industry, so not one of the big companies here, but is influencing science. And I'm kind of going through a period of speaking to some scientists that have potentially been what was the word? Well, yes, kind of involved in the industry, and others that are kind of on the line of potentially whistleblowing. And I just wonder if you have any, I've encountered quite a bit of hesitancy when it comes to that, and if you have any kind of recommendations or advice when it comes to, getting that information out. And otherwise, also specifically for Chrissy as well, I'm also about to do a story related to extreme heat in some neighborhoods in Europe, so it'd be great to know about the sensors specifically that you used and how much they cost and what they are. Hopefully not too much. Thank you.
I can tell you about the sensors afterwards. I don't think they were that expensive. But again, journalism costs loads of money, and investigations in health, I will say, I don't find them easy to get funding for. I'm just going to say it. It's really difficult. It's really, really, really hard to want to do journalism and then spend half of your time trying to get money from funders. And I don't know how we persuade people better that health, like you said, Fabiola, is everything. Like, health is in everything we do. If you don't have health, you don't really have a quality of life. So I will just say that. But when you are applying for funding, she gets to a point eventually, you do need to think about hardware, software, programs, all of that kind of stuff that you will need. So we can talk cost for sensors afterwards, but I know the ones for migrants to wear are hundreds and hundreds of pounds each. In terms of whistleblowers, there's some excellent organizations that can help. I'm completely blanking on the name. I think one is called Blueprint. If you Google, you will find organizations that are set up to help whistleblowers and work in journalism. You're right to be really cautious. We've got a few things on our site, but lots of sites will talk about it. There's really basic things like if somebody wants to whistleblow to you, make sure they don't contact you from their work email. Make sure they take a photo of something and send it to you on Signal, ideally, or WhatsApp, something that's encrypted. The first thing you have to do as a journalist is tell somebody not to put themselves at risk. But like I said, there's loads of great advice. So I think if you need that, reach out to those organizations. And also if you found other journalists that have worked with whistleblowers, reach out to them and hopefully someone will help. But yeah, I think equipment is expensive like everything else. So it is worth factoring that into what you're doing. And if you're a one-person band, a freelancer, that can be really difficult. So try and find a publication to work with early doors, I would say.
Other questions? Right here.
Hi, I'm an investigative journalist from South Africa. We're starting to look at sort of issues around pesticides. There's a huge push in South Africa at the moment to try and impose kind of EU regulations on pesticides in South Africa. Obviously, there's a lot of companies who are sort of pushing back and saying, no, you don't want to impose that in South Africa. You should allow us to carry on selling carcinogenic and mutagenic chemicals. In terms of building alliances, are there sort of any specific organizations you would kind of recommend reaching out to? I mean, it's a particularly, data-heavy job at the moment, kind of looking at hundreds of chemicals. The companies are sort of fighting, trying to prevent that process of lobbying government from being made public. And it does just seem to be something that in South Africa there's just, we're very big on government corruption, and so there's not that much interest in kind of private sector corruption.
Building journalistic alliances, is that the question? Yeah. Well, I think all of us here, perhaps. Just go ahead, Steph.
Yeah, maybe, well, it's a very simple tip. There's a civil society organization called the Pesticide Action Network, PAN. They are worldwide, and they really know their shit.
And Fabiola has done some excellent reporting on pesticides herself. I'm sure she'd love to share some knowledge with you after the panel.
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned also how to find partners or alliances. In Latin America, there is an organization that is named CLIP. They work on cross-border stories, and sometimes they find alliance from different continents. They are based in Colombia, but Salud con Lupa also investigated the double standard of the uses of pesticides, because in my country, for example, Syngenta sells 42 pesticides that are banned in Europe and the States. And I imagine that the standard is similar in other countries in Asia or in others that are flexible for this. We have some allies also in Asia because we have to get some, or looking for some fixers also. But, well, just write an email and maybe we can connect.
We have one more minute. I think there's a question back here. Just briefly, please.
Hi, I am Brazilian science journalist, and I have been working in a scientific institution about public health, and I see so much power in this type of collaboration. I know Fabiola had the experience before with epistemonials, and I want to hear of you guys what is the what you think about this type of experience, this collaboration between scientists, public health scientists, serious scientists, and journalists, and it's a type of a partnership about founding as well, another way to get founded. So I want to hear what you think about that.
We have like 12 seconds.
I have an example. The Climate Center in my country is developed by the Cayetano Heredia University, and we have like an agreement because their scientists are investigating the impact of the climate change in public health in Peru and Latin America. And I don't know if you know the Lancet Countdown Initiative. I recommend you follow the reports. But in our experience, partner with scientists, it's especially when they are part of a university and you trust in this community. For us, it's a good alliance. And during the pandemic, we partnered with a Chilean organization that is called, I forgot the name, but they are specialized on medicine based in evidence, and they review all the clinical trials that appear each week during 2 years with us. And we have...
Fabiola, I believe we are over time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to the panel.